Hi everybody, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to talk about half lap joints. I have a need to build this little stand for a new light. As you guys know, I work in a very small 11 by 11 room here, and the lights I'm currently using are mounted in here permanently. So I needed something to use filming in the basement. And I picked up this light here and built this stand for it. The light is battery powered. I can pick it up and move it around, which is really a good thing for the basement. Literally, I just sit this thing on top of my washer and dryer. You turn it off because I know it's bothering you. And aim it at it using a table saw, the radial arm saw. You know, pretty much the tools are down there next to the washer and dryer. And I can just aim this thing. And you'll see when I do some table saw footage later in this video that it lights up the table saw very nicely. So this is an excellent addition to the channel here. And you know, I made a little base here with a little rounded feet here, so it has some clearance and four solid stops. And it's just a crossing lap joint is all it is. You know, a lap joint, a normal half lap joint looks like this. This one was handmade using a gauge block. I also will show you using my router plane. And this big one here, we did with a table saw. So there's 3 different ways we did it, and I'm going to go through the whole process of doing it right now. Starting here with what we're going to do is a traditional half lap joint. This is some dimensioned pine lumber. It's already at 3/4 of an inch thick. So all I really have to do to true up the wood is to square the ends off. Remember, all of these half lap joints, no matter where you're doing them, you have to have true edges and you have to have properly dimensioned lumber, or this just won't work. So I'm using the shooting board here to get a square edge. Once you've squared up the edges and you have true lumber, the next step is to mark out the half lap joint. As you can see here, this is going a little quick. I've sped this action up. But what you basically do is take a square, mark the edge line using the actual piece of wood to dimension it. Then I'm using a 3/8 inch gauge here, gauge block, to actually make my mark all the way around. 3/8 is directly half of the 3/4 inch lumber. Gauge blocks are one of the 3 ways I'm going to use to do these joints. The gauge block I'm using here to do marking, but I also am going to use it to do some clearing of the wood, and I'll discuss that later when we get to the clearing the chips out. Alright, now we're at the point where we're going to start cutting away the wood. And I have a little miter slot cut in my very poorly beat up bench hook here. We can use it to just cut a nice clean straight edge, and then from there just make several more cuts down to the depth line, and from there you'll see we'll just hack that away with a chisel. Here I am setting up to clear the chips out with a chisel. I don't have very good bench holding on here. I have the Veritas surface vise that doesn't work well, but it's getting the job done here. So you just basically chisel away from the line and work your way to the line, a couple of shots at a time. I don't get right to the line here. I do that with the chisel laying flat on the bench. You'll see that in a minute. So right now you just go halfway. You don't want to blow it out either. So at this point you just continue working with the chisel till you get very close to your lines. You don't want to really get right in the line here. I want to get close. And if you're going to chisel down into your brass bench dog, you'll be sharpening again soon. As you can see here, I just did that. Now the brass dogs don't really hurt the chisel that much, but it's soft metal. But any metal on a chisel will dull your chisel, so be careful. So here is one of the methods that I want to show for getting to the final depth. This is using the gauge block. So like I said, I had dimensioned this piece of cherry here to be exactly 3/8 of an inch. So by putting it flat down up against the stop with the wood, I can take the chisel, lay it flat to the piece of cherry, and it should smoothly remove the waste right to the 3/8 line. Make sure you clean out underneath, get the chips out of there, because anything that pushes up on your board will change the height and change the amount you're cutting. This works very well. As you can see, this dimensioned, this Home Depot pine. This is really construction lumber. It has very large growth rings. This tree probably grew in 8 years, and they cut it down and made wood out of it. But just keep going at it. It will eventually get yourself down to your line. Okay, I finished that first board. I finally did get through that little rough patch of lumber. I'm now working on the second piece. I dimensioned it up, lined up the layout lines, and am paring away the waste here again with the gauge block. You can see here we're getting a nice piece of wood here, and this is more how it would work with hardwoods and a better cut of pine. A good sharp chisel normally will peel that away nicely with the block. I'm going to take a knife here and clean up the edge, make it sharp. You can see here I'm going to take a block plane and try to smooth a few ripples out that I have there. Anything to get it down to a nice joint. You can see here I put the two together, and it actually comes together pretty nice. Here's another joint I was working on. This one's a crossing joint, so it's in the middle. I used the saw and the chisel to clear the chips just like before, but instead of using a gauge block, I'm now using the router plane, which is a nice tool to use if you have it. Not everybody has one, and making a gauge block is easy to do with a piece of scrap. But if you do have a router plane, it is really nice to be able to clear a nice flat bottom with the router plane. You can do this on the edge of a board just like the middle here. It works better on the middle because there's a reference on both sides, but you could use a scrap and reference the edge on the end of a board. Another method to remove the bulk of the waste instead of cutting a bunch of lines and chiseling it out is to just actually saw it out. When you're sawing away a piece of wood like this, you start on a corner and work away one corner and then the other corner. You'll see I'll flip it here. Yes, I'm very frustrated with this vise. If you're walking around Lowe's or Home Depot and you see that $20 Irwin vise, don't buy it. This is why. It just doesn't work. So anyway, that's my frustration level with this vise. We'll be swapping that out soon here. So here you flip it over and you work your way down on the other corner. So you're working your way from a corner to the line and to the line at the top. You can't start right at the top and try to do all three lines at once. It doesn't work. So you'll work your way down to the line on both sides, and what you'll have is a little triangle in the middle. So when you get to your line on both sides, you straighten the board up, which I'm doing here right now, and then just cut right down. The saw will just guide right through the slot now and cut that little triangle in the middle down to your line. At that point, you're basically cut through. Then you can take and put it back in the little miter slot on my bench hook here and cut the other angle down. There's one more way I'd like to show you how to do this. I've been doing everything up in my little shop in the guest room now with hand tools, but obviously the table saw is probably the quickest way to make a half lap. Realistically, put a dado set in and get a nice piece of wood on your miter gauge and just hog half of it away. I milled this board down to 1/2 inch. You can see my setup blocks right on the fence there. I took the 1/4 inch out and set the blade to 1/4 inch, a little bit off of 1/4, so I have some room to clean up. Then just do the other board. You can see I've already done the other side of these boards, just to honestly do it on both sides to make sure everything's working, and also because, like a dummy, I forgot to turn the camera on when I did the other side. So this is round 2 here. And the reason I don't quite go all the way to 1/4 inch is when I close these down, you'll see here in a second, it's kind of rough. This is a dado stack I got at Harbor Freight for 20 bucks. It does the job, but it's a little sketchy, so a hand plane will clean that up and make this a good fit. Hi everybody, welcome back to the shop. So today we're going to wrap up the filming I've been doing on the half lap project. I believe we started with this half lap here, which I think you can see. It came out pretty nice. I had to do a little planing here to get it level, but you can see it came out pretty good. And you know, the beauty of a half lap, they're square. If you're able to get the miter slot, so this cut, if you make that cut square, the joint will be square. And then it's just a matter of making sure your gauge block gets you at the right depth to make a good cut. I also did a half lap in the middle. This also came out kind of nice. I did some cleanup here, and as you can see, and maybe you can or can't see, I got a little wonky with my plane and I dipped in here a little too far. But this is a very true joint. Unfortunately, you know, my planing got a little wonky there, but I could clean this up. All I'd have to do is go down about a couple of thou and the whole thing would be smooth again. Very good, strong joint, and again, perfectly square. I also did a crossing joint here, and this one was just out of some scrap. You can see I really just hacked it up. But the main reason I've been doing these half lap joints is to show you this here, which is my new light. And as you can see, this base is a crossing lap joint. See if you can see a close-up of it here. And then the main camera should be able to see it here. The reason I did this was twofold. The whole half lap project started because I want to do two things. One was make the stand for this light, which we've done, and this light went with me in the basement when we did this one. This is the one I did with the table saw. And as you can see, I don't know how this camera's doing here next to me. As you can see, the table saw joint also came out quite nice. I prefer using the gauge block and the chisel. Of the three methods I did, this is the method I prefer. For hand tools, it's pretty quick. If I was just making one frame, a face frame, a picture frame, I would probably do it this way every time. Truth be told, I have a project coming up to do a bunch of storm windows in the house. I'll use the table saw for that because the table saw is much quicker when you have to do a lot of them. And there's really, unfortunately, no way around that. It is not the cleanest method. As you can see, you know, this is an unfinished cut here, and it's pretty rough. Now, granted, I have a cheap dado blade. A better dado set might do better, but as you can see here on this other side that I did, kind of by mistake, but I'm glad I have it to show you now, you can feel those grooves. It's not the greatest cut in the world. I had to take and run a block plane over both of these, then glue it together, and really after that I made like 3 passes with a plane and about 2 minutes with this sander here and I was done. So all of these came out good. I'm pretty happy with them all. The measurement is pretty easy and you can do it without measuring. Everything can be done with gauge blocks, or as you can see on the table saw, I used my my guide blocks down there. This light is going to be invaluable to me. This is the light I used for the filming in the basement. The beauty of this is it's battery powered. I can just grab this like this on its stand, pick it up, and take it down to the basement and film. My room here is very small. I have you know, it's an 11 by 11 room, and to do this work in here and film, I've got lights mounted. So to bring them downstairs to the basement would be a real pain. So this light is a godsend for me to be able to show you the table saw. Hopefully soon the lathe down there, my radial arm saw. I do have a basement full of power tools, so I'm not stuck to this 11 by 11 room by any stretch. But it's a dungeon down there. It's kind of damp and dreary. That's why I like to work up here. And this is going to let us do it. So I'm glad I did this. And that's what got us down the road of these half laps. I needed to make this joint. And this joint seems to work very well. That's the half lap joint. It's a great joint for face frames, picture frames, stands. It's used a lot in the bases of tables. There's a lot of great uses for it. So I hope you enjoyed this and get some use out of the half lap joint. Thanks for watching.